Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this session. It's something that I'm particularly passionate about. I've been passionate about this in different ways across the years, but more than ever, I think what we're talking about here this morning is pertinent to all of us. I love that there is such a mix of people coming into this venue with different backgrounds, different experiences, different needs. And so I know that there are a lot of us in the room now who are coming from traditional homeschool backgrounds. Some of us are coming from online schools. Some of us are at physical schools. Some of us are doing such a range of different types of education with our families. I love that there's more option than there's ever been before when it comes to how we educate our kids. And I think that the future is really bright for education. I think that there are a lot of things that we really need to work on collectively. But I'm excited about the topic that we're talking about today, which is individualization in education and how that's playing out. Just so that you know, my name is Mark and I come from Koa Academy, K-O-A, Koa Academy. It's an online school for grades 4 to 12 and we are IEB curriculum. And we started last year with grades 4 to 9 and this year have launched grades 10 and 11 and next year we'll write our first matrics. I want to talk to you very quickly about this idea of individualized learning through the lens of three different spheres. So imagine with me a Venn diagram. Unfortunately, you've walked into a lecture theatre where not only is the speaker passionate about education, he's also a scientist. I have a science background, so I have to start with a Venn diagram, right? So my Venn diagram has got three circles. You all know the Venn diagram, right? Am I in the right room? Venn diagram, three circles overlapping. Okay, and we've got a convergence point in the middle where all three overlap, and that's what we're talking about this morning. And the three circles that we're talking about are education, which we're all here for. I mean, there's not a single person in this conference venue who's not interested in some form of education. So education is the one sphere. The other is online learning and what's happening in the online space. The online space is exploding. It's affecting our lives in such dramatic ways. We know this thanks to the pandemic, but actually we've been on a road for a couple of decades now where what's happening in the online space permeates every part of our lives, whether our work or our school is online or not. Okay, so that's relevant to all of us as well. And then the final sphere that we're talking about is a group of kids called the Gen Zers, Generation Z. All of us in this room who have children, our children are either Gen Z, I see you waving, I know that you're a Gen Zer. Either you're a Gen Zer, or if you're a little bit younger, you might be Generation Alpha. And we'll talk about how those three spheres are interacting with each other, and we're looking at individualized learning and how it's more key than it's ever been before. And probably one of the most underrated, underevaluated, underdeveloped parts of education historically. All right, and with each of those, I'm going to tell you what Koa is doing, just give you a little drop in the bucket on, okay, here's something that we're doing to address this particular sphere, and then I'll ask you a question, a bit of a takeaway for you. What are you doing with your kids? What are you doing at your school to address these things? You ready? All right, I'm just going to peek, make sure it comes up every time. First, let's talk about education, and this story goes back quite a long way. This story starts in 1926. And don't worry, I've got the cards at the front here with the time on the card, so I know we're not going to run out of time. This isn't going to go through every year from 1926, but that's where our story starts. In 1926, the US Air Force realized that their Air Force planes were going to be more critical than ever before. The way that combat was developing, more of it was taking to the skies. And so they started looking into how are we going to design our planes, and in particular, how are we going to design our cockpits? It's essential. We've got to make sure that the cockpit is well designed. And so what they did was probably what I would have done if you'd asked me. They called in over 100 pilots and they said to the pilots, we're going to take body measurements. So they took a series of body measurements and they averaged out the body measurements to come up with what are the average body measurements for a US Air Force pilot. And then they designed the cockpit around those average measurements. Does this make sense to you? It makes sense to me. It sounds like a reasonable way to go about doing it. We're going to have a pretty good fit for everybody. This is a cockpit that's going to fit everybody. Well, over the subsequent years, they had a lot of planes go down, and they couldn't explain why. The weather was good. They weren't in combat. The training of the pilots was excellent. There didn't seem to be any malfunction in the plane. So why are these planes going down? And they chalk it up to human error, human error, human error. Pilot must have made a mistake, right? And this carried on over the years, and they tried different training techniques, and eventually they settled on it must be the cockpit. When you're in the heat of the moment and you've got to reach for that lever, you've got to push the button, or you've got to read a gauge, and it's just a fraction too far or too high or off balance, is not where you need it to be, that could be life and death right there in that moment. And so they reevaluated their cockpit design, and what they did was they doubled down. They brought in 4,063 Air Force pilots. And they took not just a few body measurements, they took over 250 body measurements on each of these 4,063. And they've designed the better average. This now, we're not talking about just, the length of your leg and your chest circumference. We're talking about the distance from the middle of your eye to the top of your ear, or the length of your thumb. Now we have the perfect cockpit, the perfect average that surely will fit everyone. And planes kept going down. Things got worse. The height of the problem, 17 planes crashed in one single day. And so along came a man named Lieutenant Daniels. And Lieutenant Daniels studied at Harvard. He was in the US Air Force, but he wasn't a pilot. And he'd studied the law of averages. And he said this. He said, I'm convinced that when it comes to designing for the individual, the average is completely useless. And they said, we don't understand what you're talking about. And he said, give me those measurements. And he took the measurements from 4,063 people, and he looked at all, he said, let's not even consider all 250 measurements. Just tell me the 10 most important. And so they said, okay, height of the pilot, chest circumference, length of their arm. They took the 10 most critical body measurements. And he said, looking only at those 10, I want to see how many of the 4,063 pilots fall within a 30% error range of your average. That's a big error range. So we're saying if this is the average height of a pilot, the US Air Force pilot should just be within 30% up or down of that height. That's a big range to fall within. And he just looked at the 10 most critical measurements. How many of the 4,063, and I'd love you to shout out, you can give me a number or a percentage, how many of the 4,063 do you think fell within just the 10 most basic with a 30% error range? Any guesses? How many were considered reasonably? How many? 4,000 out of the 4,000. Optimistic young lady, I love that. Any other guesses? 1,000? I would have guessed about 1,000 as well. One more guess? One? That's the closest so far. The answer is 0. 0, not 1. Not 1 out of 4,063 pilots fell within a 30% error range of the 10 most basic body measurements. And in his report, Lieutenant Daniels wrote to the US Air Force, and he said to them, you have designed a cockpit for the average human being, and in doing so, you have designed a cockpit for no one. Your cockpit fits no one. And so they changed. Because we're talking life and death here, the US Air Force changed overnight, and they started creating adjustable seats and straps, and they used, instead of the pilots would have to go in and do fittings for their flight jackets. And overnight, things changed, and those crash statistics turned on their head. And we've known that the same is true in education. Remember, we're talking about education. We've known that the same is true in education for as long as we've known it in Air Force. But things haven't changed for 50, 60 years significantly in education. We still teach to the middle. In a lot of ways, we still teach to the middle. And we expect 20, 30, 40, 50 kids in our classes or in our online schools or in our boxed curriculums. We still expect kids to pretty much fit the average and fall into the average system. And it just doesn't work. So that's why we're passionate about individualized learning at Koa. So what are we doing? Well, we're doing a few significant things. We love the online space in particular because it gives us this flexibility. We are creating individualized timetables. Even though we're in classes, we have a timetable for every single child that's in the class, and it's their timetable, and they can change it to suit them. We have flexible term dates for parents, and our teachers have become facilitators of the learning rather than teachers of content. And so we're seeing this personalized approach where every teacher knows every child, and they know each child's individual preferences and needs, and we're able to address them when they need it. Here's my takeaway for you. Whatever system you're following, you might not be in an online school like we are. What are you doing to address your child's individualized needs? How much time and effort are you putting into thinking about, maybe you've got 2 kids and your 2 kids are very different to each other. They actually need very different things to each other. How are you addressing those 2 different needs? I want to encourage you, when you walk back into the main venue over there and you're walking around those stalls, don't think about one-stop shop solutions. You're not going to find it. There is no one-stop shop solution that's going to fit, never mind 2 of your kids, even 1 of your kids. So we have to start seeing education as unbundled and looking for flexible solutions that we can use to suit our child's needs. Let's go on to the next one, which is the online space. We know that this has permeated every part of our lives. We don't need to talk about that. We know it. You've got a smartphone in your pocket. No matter how you feel about the online space, it's a part of our lives. I'm particularly passionate about this, and I'll tell you why. It's because it gives us such awesome opportunities. Such awesome opportunities. And we can leverage this for good. But there's one particular thing about the online space that I want to talk to you about. The Pew Research Center has done a lot of study into the online space and how it's affecting our kids in particular. Because that's what we really want to know, right? Is what is the online space doing for our kids? And so the Pew Research Center, instead of asking parents who actually, let's be honest, we don't know as much about the online space as our kids do, so they decided, let's go ask the kids. So they went and spoke to a range of children, teenagers, and young adults, and they just asked them the very simple question, do you think being online is good or bad? Do you think being online is good or bad? And I was floored. Bad, I see that answer, bad. Thank you for that. Your response has been noted. I was floored by the answer. The answer was, overwhelmingly, neither. Neither. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. It just is. It's like, it's the world that we were born into. The online space is just the online space, and it's there. And it's just a part of our lives. There were a percentage who said it's good, and there were a percentage who said it's bad. And what surprised me even more was the reason, because if they said no, it's good, or they said it's bad, then the Pew Research Center said why. They asked them, why do you think it's good? Why do you think it's bad? And what surprised me even more was that the reason that they said it's good and the reason that they said it's bad were the same. It had to do with social connectedness. It's all about feeling socially connected. The kids who said the online space is good, it's healthy, they said things like, man, I feel so connected to my friends. I feel so plugged in. I feel so involved. I feel encouraged. I feel inspired. It's about being socially connected. The kids who said it's bad said, I feel lonely. I feel discouraged. I feel bullied. I feel like there's no one there who's for me. And so social connectedness, it's all about social engagement. And so when we started Koa Academy, we decided that this was going to be a key part of our offering. Got to make sure that you address this idea of social connectedness in the online space. You see, your kids were born into a digital world. Your kids are digital natives. We know that. But let me tell you something else. Your kids are not digitally literate automatically. They are digital natives, but they are not digitally literate automatically. And our job as educators, as parents, is to take them from being digital natives to create them as digitally literate citizens. Kids who feel empowered in the online space. Kids who can navigate the online space with confidence and with sass. I love that line. It's a line with one of the organizations that we worked with, is an organization called Clicked. And we love them. We love that tagline that they use on their website because it describes what we want for the kids in our school. That's why we partnered with them. That's what I would want for your kids as well, is for them to be able to navigate the online space with confidence and sass in a healthy way. So how are we doing that at Koa? Well, the sort of hearting beat of everything that we do, the beating heart of everything that we do is our pods. It's our pods. We decided that if we're going to succeed in the online space, we're only going to have 8 kids in a class. 8 kids on the screen. You can see everybody. You can hear everybody. Mics on, cameras on. We're involved. We know each other. We're connected. And I've been blown away. I've taught in physical schools, and I've taught in online schools, and I've been blown away with my experience of being in those pods, how well I get to know the kids so quickly, because social connectedness in the online space is so important. And that's become a crucial part and a really exciting part of our day. We meet every day in our pods of 8. So here's my takeaway for you, my question for you. Wherever you are in terms of educating your kids, what are you doing to help your kids move from being digital natives to being digitally literate? That's a key question for you to ask, because it's crucial that you set them up for success so that they can enter the online space with confidence and really leverage the benefits. Man, there is a world of opportunity, and you need to help your kids to leverage those opportunities. Last one. You ready? Anybody recognize that? I see that hand. If your hand is up, you are not Gen Z. All right? This was my first phone. I'm not Gen Z. We're one generation older. But Gen Zers would look at this and think, oh my goodness, did you honestly used to use those? Best phone ever, telling you can drop it from the 5th floor and it still works. Put it in the washing machine. Anyway, the point is, our kids, if they're younger than this phone, they fall into the category of Gen Z. And if they're from about grade 4, grade 5 down, they would be Gen Alpha. We don't know a lot about Gen Alpha yet, but we do know a lot about Gen Z. And what we learn about Gen Z so far, we've discovered that they are more financially conservative than we are, which is interesting. They are more open to societal change than we were. They like disruption, which is interesting. But interestingly, when you start to research, what do Gen Z kids need in terms of education? It's very different to what we needed. And the scary thing is we're the ones that determine their experience of education. So we often set systems and structures which suit us and our style of learning and don't speak to them. And so the McKinsey Research Center, they did a whole bunch of research into what do Gen Z kids need in terms of their education, what speaks to them. And these were some of the things that they said. These were the key takeaways for them. It was things like, I have to have digital access in my learning. I have to. Like if you want me to learn effectively, I have to be able to access things digitally. Secondly, I have to have customized pathways. Things used to be very linear. You know you're going to end up with this profession for 40 years, and so let's backtrack. What university degree do you need? Let's backtrack. What prerequisites do you need in year 1 at university? Okay, let's backtrack. What subject choices must you make in grade 10 to 12? Let's backtrack. And you go all the way down to what must my child be doing in grade 2? And you kind of have them on this linear path, this linear trajectory. It doesn't speak to Gen Z kids. They don't want that. They want customized pathways where there are more options available to them. And we're seeing these shifts in education. Just a quick example from Koa, we're looking at creating exit certificates for our kids other than just the IEB matric that they get. They get an IEB matric, they can do that linear progression straight into university and beyond. But we also want them going away with, hey, I am certified in this world of coding. I am certified as a conservational biologist. I am certified as so that there are more customized pathways available for them. Third thing is mixed media. We're fairly comfortable with this one, right? Don't just present work to me, ideas to me in one form. I need it mixed up. I need images, I need video, I need audio, I need text, I need interaction with others, I need study time on my own. There needs to be mixed media so that I can engage with the information in many different ways. Fourthly, it needs to be real-world relevant. One of the interesting things about Gen Z kids that's different to us is that they more highly value the meaning of their work than their paycheck. They are more likely to choose a career based on the meaning of the work over its salary than we were. We leant towards salary. And that's interesting because it means that when kids are learning in school, they want to know, what's the meaning of this? How does this matter to me in the real world? Next up, soft skills focus. This is one of my particular passions as well. This is something that we still have to teach our kids, which is soft skills are so critical. They're more important than hard skills. Hard skills are those things that we learn for the job. Soft skills are those things that we learn for ourselves that apply to any job. And schools typically are pretty good at, and curriculums are pretty good at teaching hard skills. They're not so good at teaching soft skills traditionally. And so that's something that we're really passionate about addressing, is creating people who are interacting with others and thinking critically and leading and collaborating in really meaningful ways that's going to set them up for success in the real world. So your takeaway for that is, have you thought about your kid? Have you thought about their needs? Take a look at these 5 images on the screen and ask yourself the question, which of these maybe do I need to reassess in terms of their education and what they might not be getting or what they are getting. But that's it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And I don't know if you have any questions for me before I jump off the stage.